Hello and welcome to episode 132 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is February 24th, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So, on our podcast, we talk a lot about SAP and Microsoft. A lot of topics are infrastructure related, where we talk about features on Azure and in SAP and how they help customers to run their SAP systems better on Azure. Then there are integration topics, where we recently talked a lot about pre-built solutions that SAP and Microsoft have been developing to integrate SAP and Microsoft processes to make them work more seamlessly together, like the recent announcement during Ignite and Sapphire around the SAP S/4HANA Cloud and Teams integration. Today, we want to talk about how customers and partners can develop an integration by themselves. Just yesterday, we had a great workshop with DSAG, the German Speaking SAP Usergroup, and 50 customers and partners. Based on an SAP S/4HANA 2022 system, we developed an integration using events in Microsoft Teams, showed how to load data in Excel, create a simple bot, and also build a small app in Microsoft Word to fetch data from SAP. I'm really glad to have the whole team behind this workshop with us. So we have Karl and Harish from SAP, we have Martin, Bart, and Robert from Microsoft. So let's jump right into it. Maybe Karl, Harish, maybe before we get really started, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself, and then let's.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Pankraz. So also very warm welcome from SAP side. My name is Karl Kessler. I'm responsible for the product management of the ABAP platform, and I'm very happy to have this joint activities, and the workshop yesterday was really a great experience. Over to you, Harish.
Thanks, Karl. Hello, everyone. I'm Harish. I'm also an ABAP platform product management, and very happy to be part of the workshop yesterday. It was a nice experience to know something new and show what we have. Thanks a lot.
Cool, perfect. Martin, I mean, you're a regular almost, so but still.
Maybe there's like a badge where you can count appearances in the channel. Martin Pankraz, I'm a like team member, same team as Holger. Both of us look at the like integration zoo that we have between both vendors, Microsoft and SAP. So workshops like the one yesterday, where we look really into various parts of the platform, are close to my heart, and also talking to the customers directly to learn what this is about and how it lands with them. And one of the takeaways for me yesterday was, okay, the difference is really in enterprise readiness, and inspiration comes first, but then next step, that's what some of the participants says, let's look at reaching the next level once you have gotten a taste. Yeah. Your next, Bart.
Yeah. So hello, my name is Bart Delanghe. I'm part of the EMEA Black Belt team for SAP on Azure, and our team is looking after, on the one hand, the infrastructure to run SAP on Azure, but also how you can extend and innovate SAP with Azure.
Cool, perfect. So let's try to collect what we actually did. I think, a few months already back, we had some first discussion with DSAG on how can we address this joint community? How can we look into integration topics between SAP and Microsoft? I mean, there are certain working groups within DSAG mainly focused on SAP development, and Martin and we had some discussions with the working group for ABAP development, basically, and it turned out that there is quite a lot of interest in extending the ABAP development platform basically also to the Microsoft side. And then that's, I think, where the whole thing got started, where we sat down with the DSAG folks, with a few customers, and thought, well, what are some potential scenarios that we could document, that we could help with to describe. And that's, I think, how the whole thing got rolling. And as a result now, let me actually share my screen here. We created a GitHub repo. So our goal was from the very beginning to document this for this joint workshop with DSAG, but then also to make this available to the broader community, so that everyone who's interested in integrating SAP and Microsoft has a good starting point, I would say. So that's why we try to document everything as good as possible. So there are obviously a few prerequisites that you need to run through. So we're using an SAP S/4HANA 2022 system via the Cloud Appliance Library. So I think that's something that everyone can easily get. And maybe Karl, in a second, you can also talk about some of the features that are now available there. Then we obviously needed to do some installations, and one of the things that we installed is this great online shop that Harish and Karl and the team have developed there. So we had a fantastic starting point that we could leverage on the SAP side. But that's obviously just the SAP side. So now this is what the ABAP developer already knows. So now the idea was, what can we do next? And that's where we introduced an Azure. So yeah, we used an Azure subscription. Obviously, there's a trial version of the Azure subscription that you can use. And we looked at different integrations. So we want to use an integration using RFCs, using the .NET connector. We want to integrate via the ABAP SDK, the ABAP SDK for Azure, into the event grid on the SAP on the Microsoft side, and then yeah, obviously the bot framework and stuff like that. So basically, we created this scenario that really runs you through a whole end-to-end process, basically. So you start on the SAP side, and I'll show in a second this online shop. But then it's all about how can we get this information? How can we get the events into Teams, for example? And how can we have some interactions from Teams back to the SAP system? How can we work with events and really make automatic triggers basically from the SAP system? How can we, yeah, I already said, write data back? How can we get the data into Excel and work there with the information basically live from the SAP system? How can we create a bot that potentially then can also be integrated in Teams and stuff like that? And finally, how can we look in the integration into Office? And in our specific case, we just did this using Microsoft Word. So maybe we can take a look at that and also take a closer look behind the scenes, basically. So the starting point, let me actually refresh here this page, is this online store. And yeah, I'm certainly not the ABAP expert, so I'll hand over in a second to Karl, who can talk a little more about this. But in general, the idea was that you have here an online shop, and you can create orders here directly from the online shop. And if then maybe a manager or someone sees, okay, that's fine, then you can also create here purchase requisition directly here from this online shop. So before we continue with this story, maybe Karl, maybe you can talk a little about what's so special about this online shop. What's behind that from an SAP side, I would say.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Holger. And I think the magic behind this online shop is basically ABAP Cloud. Yeah, ABAP Cloud is kind of the technology that we have used on the backend side to integrate with Microsoft, with the Microsoft tools, with the Microsoft universe, if I may say so. And where we started was basically with extensibility options for S/4HANA and S/4HANA Cloud. And here you see on the left-hand side, you see a classical S/4HANA Cloud system. And on the right-hand side, we have the business technology platform. There are various options how you can extend the S/4HANA Cloud, for example, as a key user. If you're logged onto an S/4HANA system with key user tools, you can do on-stack developer extensibility and side-by-side extensibility. And the tool that we use, that Harish will later show, is exactly this number 2 here, this on-stack developer extensibility. That means we go directly to the S/4HANA system, no matter whether it's cloud, public cloud, private cloud, or on-premise. In this case, we used on-premise, running in Karl, as Holger already mentioned. But we are not doing it the traditional way, accessing physical tables, etc. But rather, we always interface with public interfaces. That's the big topic around ABAP Cloud. That means we work in an upgrade stable and cloud compliant and cloud ready fashion. This is what ABAP Cloud is all about. And there is a multitude of capabilities inside the ABAP Cloud map that you can see here. We will see business objects, for example, in the store. We saw these order objects that Holger just showed. You saw the Fiori UI. That means the shop is being presented in the browser, and you can create a new order and trigger, for example, then in an event, which is then being consumed by Microsoft Teams. Everything runs on top of the SAP HANA database. And the good news to all our customers, our joint customers, is that ABAP Cloud is available. That means it's mandatory in Steampunk, in BTP ABAP environment, on BTP standalone. It's mandatory in S/4HANA Cloud Public Edition, and it's our recommended way to build applications on the private cloud and in on-premise. There you can also combine the different techniques, so the classical ABAP code with the ABAP Cloud code. And how does this work? Very shortly explained. Basically, we have something which we call the language version. So inside the system S/4HANA 2022 that Holger mentioned, we can switch the language versions. That means we can combine the classical standard ABAP that every customer has done over the last 20 years with a very modern ABAP Cloud version, basically in the same system, on the same runtime environment. But you can now build your innovations in ABAP Cloud ready for the future and combine them with classical ABAP. And our workshop was exactly going into that direction. So last but not least, I would like to emphasize, sorry, a little bit of animation here, that we are about to organize our development into tiers. You see this green tier. That means this green tier will basically host all of the ABAP Cloud development, like this shop application that we just saw. And we will interface with classical ABAP development. Bart will tell us later about this. For example, when we integrated with the ABAP SDK from Microsoft, or with the Azure SDK from Microsoft, because this has then to be wrapped into a so-called tier 2 component, which then can be safely called inside our ABAP Cloud environment. That's pretty much in a nutshell the idea behind, and it should give our customers or joint customers a good basic understanding of what you have to do in the backend to make your environment ready for integration with the great Microsoft tools.
Mm-hmm. And I think for me, what was really interesting was really this usage of the ABAP SDK for Azure, because obviously the ABAP SDK is not yet developed using ABAP Cloud, but still the old or classic methodology, or whatever you might call it. And then the way how you explained it, how you can wrap this and still make it available now as part of the ABAP Cloud development model, more or less. I thought that was really, really interesting, so that you can really reuse your classic code while still adopting the best practices now of the ABAP Cloud development method.
Absolutely.
I thought that was really
and
interesting.
Our idea, if I may add to that one, our idea is also to move step by step into the more modern world. Yeah? So we integrated the SDK as is. Mm-hmm. Of course, many of our customers and partners, Microsoft and many other ABAP partners, are now in the position to move their code bases closer to the ABAP Cloud world and to then very direct cloud-ready integrations. For example, then leverage SAP Event Mesh together with the Azure Grid from Microsoft. There's plenty of opportunities ahead of us. That is the great story here. So we are not forcing you directly to go to the latest level, but do it in a staggered approach, in a stepwise approach. That's the idea.
Cool. So maybe we can take a quick look at that. So the idea was I would now create an order in the online shop. So similar like all the participants has done, and then Harish, you can set obviously breakpoints on the SAP side, and then let's take a look what actually happens on the SAP side, and then once we are done there, we'll switch back over to me, so that maybe we can take a quick look at the logic app, or first of all, Bart, maybe you can talk a little about how the events are actually getting sent to Azure. And then we can continue on the Microsoft side and see what happens there, and then how we see the result in Teams. So let me do this. Let me click here on Create. Let me select some. What should we do? I'll need a new laptop. Okay.
We were selecting laptops yesterday, Holger.
Okay. Shouldn't I? Then let me do a table. A table. Okay.
It's not a tablet. It's a table.
Yeah, it's a table, yeah. And I need a bigger table, obviously. I need a bigger table. Okay, now let's click on create. I hope, Harish, you are back. You're ready. You have set the breakpoints.
Yes.
Perfect. So let me click on create. Good.
Now
I
I think
guess.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just share my screen.
Yes,
Already
perfect.
you can see here the debugger is blinking in Eclipse.
Perfect.
So let me just, we are in the debugging mode, and we can see in the code which we have implemented for the online shop, the implementation for this online shop business object, so to say. Here we have just said when create is not initial, which means what you have done is basically creating a order, and this is not initial. So let's just see what is inside. Because this is a managed business object with UUID as a primary key, the key has been generated, or a preliminary key, and the order ID has been calculated, which we have implemented in the business object. Ordered item is table, created at, created by, etc., etc. Now we just go to the class or this wrapper where the Azure bus magic happens. Let's just see. Now we can go in. And here, this is what Karl just mentioned. This class, this JetCL MS1, is cloud compliant. Maybe you can just see the properties once again. This properties. I just need to pull it up, little bit up. It's used in cloud development. So it is a cloud compliant class. And in this class, we are using this function module in a background task because the code in this function module is not cloud compliant, let's say legacy code. So we are using this class as a wrapper to make this function module or this Azure bus call cloud compliant. And now we are in the Azure bus. Let's just see. Now we can go further. So here we are preparing the event data, which will be sent to the bus. Now let's just jump to the debugging. And here we see the event grid sending the converted data as X string to Azure event grid. Now we just F6.
Yeah. And that's actually the call towards the ABAP SDK, yeah, this one.
Yeah. Now we have sent from, so to say, SAP side to Azure event grid, and we are more or less done. A new order has been created. We can also check it. Yes. And now you need a bigger table, which is also here.
Perfect. Cool. And Bart, you were just saying, so I mean, the online shop obviously has all these the standard functionality, but in the beginning there was no event that was basically triggered, and I think that's where you came in and where you enhanced the whole thing with the ABAP SDK for Azure in this specific case.
Yeah, indeed. Maybe also let me share my screen so I can show some things. Because what we used to send the events towards the Azure event grid was the ABAP SDK. Now, what is the ABAP SDK? It's an ABAP wrapper around the REST API that, for example, an event hub or an event grid has. So it's something that we as Microsoft provide. It's open source. It's available on GitHub, so you can also install it from there. Basically, it will deliver you ABAP classes to talk to an Azure event grid, a service bus, Cosmos DB, and so on. So
yeah, I guess
it's available
out all the authentications, right, Bart? So it's like the feel-good way of doing integrations, yeah. But it really accelerates the journey of the ABAPer to do the integration. No?
Yeah, indeed, because all this ABAP handling, also the access key handling and stuff is also already in there. It's then you don't have to program it anymore, and you get the classes for free, and also you get the tables where you can configure the whole connection. And so if you look behind the screens, if I quickly turn towards the SAP system, what you need there, since we are talking towards the event grid, as typically you need an RFC destination, HTTP connection towards the URL of the event grid. And then you also need to fill in some customizing tables to configure. Let me say here, this one, for example, as config. Then you say, okay, I make a configuration for my ABAP SDK. I link it towards this RFC destination. And then in another table, you specify here, you, for example, this interface ID, it's a connection towards the event grid. Here you see all the other possibilities. And here, that's, for example, the access key that you need to be able to enter the event grid. And then from a setup side, that's it. And then, of course, you need to have your coding. And so let me show you. This was the function module that Harish was showing. So this is the function module that is called by the online shop when the order is saved or modified. Yeah. And here you see, first thing, here we create the event grid object using the factory classes. Then we spend some time preparing the event, serializing it, putting into a JSON string. And in the end here, this is where we call or we send out the message towards the Azure event grid.
Cool.
And just for completeness reasons, this is exactly the integration. Where we want to head for is that we then integrate the integration with the raise event statement in RAP. This was just released in August timeframe. Of course, this requires full cloud compliance. And then we will have an integration really on the event level with raise event. But it's good to have all of these opportunities to leverage your existing code. That's exactly this idea of combining ABAP Cloud ready code together with the classical ABAP code, how we call it these days.
Exactly, and just to add to that, so we in one of our recent episodes we also had Carsten Strothmann from the Event Mesh team with us, where we already talked about the current implementation in beta. So where if the SAP system sends the events to SAP BTP Event Mesh, where we have this native integration in Azure Event Grid, and that would be another way for right now, since this is obviously not yet GA. We were using here this ABAP SDK integration, which is also fairly slim, and yeah, and also was able to really send the events over to the Azure side.
Absolutely.
And maybe actually let me now quickly take over, because what I've done now on the SAP on the Microsoft side, what we did is we received the event in the event grid, and then from the event grid we put this into a service bus. I'm here in the Service Bus Explorer, and you can already see I just grabbed this event. I peeked into the queue, and you can see this is our here the 353. That's the event that we had. Now, once in the service bus, and actually, I mean, there's I think this is always a very nice overview here, where we have the event grid. Event grid sends or receives the different events and puts them, in our case, into a specific service bus queue. Then we have a logic app. Okay, it's already running. This logic app basically receives this event. Then, since I mean, obviously this would not have been necessary in a productive implementation, but we wanted to show you can still do RFC calls. So at first we're doing an RFC call to fetch additional information with the order ID that we received. And then what we are doing is we're doing yet another OData call in this specific case to fetch additional information. And we post, you don't see this here at the moment, we post a message into Teams. So remember, we had here this 353, our table. I need a bigger table. So now we have the notification in Teams. We can click here on the link, and we see actually the details of this specific order here in the online shop. And you can see there's no purchase requisition at the moment. Now what I can do is from Teams, I can click here on Create Purchase Requisition. We update the information in the SAP system. And now if I just refresh this screen here, we
are in the debugger again.
Okay. The debugger,
please.
Now the
share.
I think it is the.
Okay, I already thought because I tested this before and it was working perfectly fine. But
now
it's
you can see if the purchase requisition has been created. Yeah, it is created.
You need to refresh once more.
Okay. So you ran through the debugger basically,
exactly.
Right? And then now we can see the purchase requisition. And I think that was the first part, and I think that was a fairly good end-to-end flow, and I think it was very much appreciated. But Martin, you already mentioned also one point, because we clearly highlighted in the workshop that we explicitly focused on basic authentication. So we didn't want to, we really wanted to concentrate on the scenario, not necessarily on the enterprise readiness, as you called it. But I think there were already some discussions on a follow-up workshop or a deep dive where we then would also talk about how would we do this with a single sign from a single sign-on perspective. And I think, yeah, I mean, you have already created lots of blog posts and information around this, but I thought that there was actually some good feedback. So maybe we can really work on a follow-up and really take a closer look at the single sign-on pieces here.
Definitely, yeah. This is also what we see when we see DSAG surveys, etc. Yeah? That we as Microsoft differ because of enterprise readiness and the completeness of vision there. And a quick hint on why do we do Event Grid and Service Bus in combination there. Yeah? For the scenario here, for a single user, it wouldn't have been necessary, but we need to dispatch to 50 users simultaneously in parallel and have them not interfere with each other. So you could imagine this is like a fan-out scenario. Yeah? That's why we combined the services the way we did. Huh?
Exactly, and that's a very good point. And I mean, it was not so much about fanning this out to 50 users, but really having 50 developers then do the same work in the ABAP system, and then there was a lot of chances of interference, and that's why we said no, let's take a fairly secure path and do this with Event Grid and Service Bus and then do it. But yeah, so that was the first part basically. So these were basically the first 3 exercises that we ran through, where we really looked at how can we get the events from or the orders from the SAP system into Teams. Then we also did a fairly quick overview of the Excel integration, and I think we have talked about this many times. So let me just quickly bring this up, where we actually link our Excel with the OData services on the SAP side. So basically, what we then just can do is here click refresh, and we get always the live data. And we should also see here. Here's our table. So it looks like everything worked fine. We see. I need a bigger table. We have the purchase requisition. So all of this is really live. So even if someone deletes something here in the Excel, as soon as you click on refresh, you get the live data back from the SAP system. So that was a very quick detour. And I think that was also good because, I mean, if you are just put yourself in the shoes, you are an ABAP developer, you have done ABAP your whole life, and then all of a sudden you're thrown into the Azure world and Teams. So there were a few hiccups, I would say, but I think thanks to Bart, thanks to the whole team, Robert, we were able to support them and get them most of the participants through that, so that they had a successful integration in Teams. But then I think it was good to have a very simple success feeling to get the data into Teams. The last or the next thing that we did is we used the bot framework, and obviously there are other mechanisms how we can create bots, but the idea was here to use this the bot framework composer to create a simple bot that allows you to also interact with our SAP system. So basically, let me just I clicked on starting the bot or and restart. So it takes a second to load. or maybe 2 seconds. But then the idea was, let me actually restart here the conversation. So if you then type something in, I need to get informations on recent order. Then it asks me what is the order ID, and what was it, 353, for example, the one that we just created. So now we're doing the same things. We're looking up the OData service in the SAP system. We are fetching information, and here you get all the information back, including now here again our purchase requisition from the SAP system. So yet another very simple integration. Obviously, this could now be integrated in a web page, maybe in an SAP Fiori screen, or obviously also in a Teams chat. But it again just showed how easy actually the integration between your SAP system and the bot framework is. The last scenario was then to look into the Office integration, and there, instead of using Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code and a full-fledged development environment, we wanted to show how easy it actually is to do this directly from Word or from Office itself. So we used here the Script Lab add-in. So anyone can just add this to their Office 365 environment. This is a very simple TypeScript code, basically, that allows you to interact from this task pane here with the content of your Word document. So basically, what this does is you have your text here on the left-hand side. You have the order number. Let's go again here with our 535 order number. And now if I click on Fetch Order ID, we are following the very same principle as before. We're calling the OData service on the SAP side. We are retrieving the information. We are parsing the information, and we are pasting this into Word. Now, obviously, this would work in a similar way with Excel. There was also a lot of feedback by the participants. What about the Outlook integration? And yes, the integration in Outlook would work again in a very similar scenario. So I think that gave the participants a good overview of how they can combine their SAP data, the SAP services, also with the Office client. Good. So that was the whole workshop, basically. As mentioned, all of this is documented. We'll put the URL in the show notes. We still need to put some final touches on the GitHub side to really also document how you can install the online shop, how you do the final configurations. There's a lot of things already documented, but I guess for a real, if you really want to do this at home, you'll need to prepare a few things that we probably need to document a little more. But yeah, if you are interested in these scenarios, take a look at the GitHub and let us know how it goes, basically. Good. Anything else that we should cover, that we should talk about? Any additional feedback or impressions from the workshop yesterday?
Yeah, if I may share, I found the atmosphere extremely productive. So both, we had a virtual workshop, as Holger already mentioned, people in the room in the famous Maybach room in the apartment with Microsoft. Great experience, great food. And it was really great to see that there were a lot of really tough ABAPers. That means they have all of this background knowledge. They even showed us some of the backend systems. They asked, where can I already play around, for example, with the ABAP Cloud version? Yeah, so you can enable, the full scope is only available with 2022, but you can play around already a little bit in 2021 and 2020 because this language code version is already there. And then it was really a great experience. I did also the exercises on my own. So I went through the workshop with the Microsoft tools. It was a great experience, really fast learning, absolutely. But I think the combined power is interesting stuff. So you can see, you can build this OData services, the backend, the RAP model on the one hand side with very clever debugging and all that stuff that Harish showed. And you have the productivity of the Microsoft tools, and you can build great joint scenarios. So I liked it very much, and the team was excellent collaboration over the last, I think, 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
I just can say it was a wonderful workshop, really.
Thank you so much for that comment, Karl. actually got me sweating a little when all people wanted sub GUI access and wanted to start messing around with it. And but they were yeah. Before I could have said no one is going to go into sub GUI just to avoid messing around. There was already shared connection strings, but I think it was helpful for them, yeah, to really connect both worlds, yeah. And we had one participant who struggled really at the beginning, but once they overcame the first hurdles, actually finished first, to at least one of the top 5 people. And I think that some of the stories that we see out there, yeah, when you come from an environment where you are used to, you know, all the things, how they go the past 30 years, but you're curious and you want to go or at least tap your toe, yeah, into new waters as well. And there's like a nice to see the learning curve, yeah. So where we had participants really like hit it off, yeah, through that journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I also there was one participant where I was also really impressed. I mean, they worked through this the integration in Teams and everything, and then they said, well, look, we have an API management portal in our company where a lot of APIs are documented. So what does it actually take to consume not this order shop API, but to consume their own API? So they were already doing the next step basically and saying, look, I have the similar setup at home. I have APIs, and it would be great to get the content of these APIs into Teams. And I mean, this workshop, there's no big difference whether you call the OData service, like in our case with the Onlineshop, or whether they call an API, an SAP API in this specific case that was protected by an API management. It's the same thing. So that was also something that I really liked, that the participants already start to think about how can they use this internally at home in their company and do some extensions.
Inspiration worked, yeah? And Karl and Harish made sure that it's not only the known paths, but also RAP and the new world is also applicable to all of those integration scenarios. So.
Yeah. And then another customer.
We developed jointly co-developed the OData protocol, which is all the basics of the. I mean, RAP stands for RESTful, ABAP RESTful application. It's about RESTful, you know. So OData, stateless communication through this very semantic-driven OData protocol. That's what it's all about. And certainly then the consumption with Fiori that you showed, Holger, and then the integration. Yeah, be it through events, be it through connectivity. This is what this modern piece is all about. And please remove the test efforts after a version change or upgrade. That's our mantra, of course, because customers are always complaining about the big efforts that they have when they go to the next version. Yeah, it's easy because you have always programmed against a public and stable API. And that means your code will run also after the version change, not only in the workshop, but also when 2023 comes out.
Yeah. And maybe Bart, you have a comment on remote support, because it was a hybrid event. So we had people on site and people like you really doing the online keyboarding.
Yeah, those was on one hand, it was fun, of course. I mean, supporting those people sometimes was a bit confusing because, I mean, I was trying to answer a question which already was answered in the room or something.
Yeah, we learn as we go how we do it about hybrid events.
Yeah. And Robert, I think you are also very fundamental in setting up the whole environment. I think that was also really cool. I mean, we provided every participant, or almost every participant, with a virtual machine that they could log on to, where they had everything pre-installed, like the bot framework and stuff like that. And then I think you even helped a few. So some of the participants, they weren't allowed to connect to the virtual machines using remote desktop. So you configured a Bastion server and help them to connect then via browser. So I think that was also really great.
It was a good testing of my scripts, you know, and I'm testing my script. Yeah. So I was confident with working everything, and then oops, another subscription, oops, another region. Yeah. So it was fun. Yeah.
Good, perfect.
So one last sentence from our side. I have to admit, for us it was also a very interesting look into the Microsoft universe. Not I mean, everybody, we are using Office every day. That's for sure. but the Azure infrastructure was extremely interesting for us. Of course, we have also some offerings into that direction. That's not a secret. And I think we really brought together the benefits of both universes. And yeah, I think that was basically the mantra of the workshop, showcasing the benefits and the combination of the tools.
And actually, just to maybe to wrap this up, then what I also found really interesting, there was this one customer that had sent 2 participants, one from the SAP team and one from their Microsoft team, and I thought that was also really interesting. I mean, they both were working with their respective teams, obviously, but this workshop also brought them together basically. So where they really where the ABAP guy or the ABAP person learned a little more about the Azure side, and the Azure person learned about RAP and the ABAP side. So I thought that was also really interesting that even customers used this opportunity to bring their different teams together. And as you said, that's what it's all about. I mean, we have great tools, you have great tools, and there is an overlap in some areas, absolutely. But I think there's also, and that's what we always talk about, there's a huge area for collaboration where we can really combine our strength and help customers to use both of our tools. Good. Well, I think that's it for today. Thank you so much. First of all, for as you said, the weeks of preparations to get this working. I think we had a very, very good working group. Here, I mean, Andre Fischer, who's not yet in the call. I think he was also very active in the background. So thanks also virtually to Andre for supporting us. Then the whole team, Bart, I think that was really fantastic. Robert, Martin, I think we had a really cool joint workshop, and who knows, maybe we can repeat this with some enhancements in the futures as well.
And not to forget Bartosz and Thijs.
Yes. No, you're fully right, because exactly. I mean, for example, Bartosz, he was also on the show a few times before, but he also did some extensive testing and helped really provide and correct the GitHub repo so that the participants didn't stumble across everything. So thanks, Martin, for reminding. Absolutely. Good. With this, thank you so much, everyone. It was great pleasure to having all of you here. And as said, I'm looking forward to the next joint event that we can drive.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.